Hi, I'm Tom Bradford. This is a guide to the Tier 1 Investor Visa. I'm going to share with you some stories from my clients who have applied successfully under this route, and we're going to look at the key points in these diagrams that you need to bear in mind when applying, and the options available to you before you apply. So before we start, I'm Tom Bradford. I'm a barrister and partner at the law firm Freeths. If you would like to subscribe, this is a series, so click the notification bell to get more on the Tier 1 Investor Visa scheme and the options available to you. So let's start with the diagram. You can see here that there are various routes available. I'm actually starting here with the amounts that you have to invest under the entrepreneur route, although here you'll see that the amounts you have to invest under the Tier 1 Investor Visa scheme are significantly higher, so 2 million, 5 million and 10 million. So I applied successfully under the 10 million route, for example, for a client who sold his business, his company in the UK, and it was important for him to be able to naturalise as a British citizen as fast as possible, but secure indefinite leave to remain as fast as possible as well. And that provided him with a 2-year route for doing so. If you invest 5 million, then you can settle in the UK after 3 years, and then 2 million after 5 years. Now, the reason I'm highlighting these other routes as well under the entrepreneur scheme is that the Tier 1 Investor Visa scheme has become less attractive to some recently. It used to be basically a completely passive regime. One could invest the £2 million, for example, and that could be invested via a dependent, so a wife, for example. In this constellation, if the husband was a breadwinner, which is typically the case in my experience, then the husband would be free to, as a dependent, not to come into the UK for half the year, as the main applicant, his wife, would. He would be free to pursue business interests elsewhere, and wouldn't have to be actively involved at all. It's a passive investment with an exit strategy as well at the end of the period, but it's a passive investment. But that meant that he could settle as a dependent, or standing that he barely set foot in the UK after the relevant period, so 5 years in the case of the £2 million route. That's now not the case. They have amended the rules so that you need to be in the UK or not out of the UK for any more than 180 days. And you need to do that in order to qualify for indefinite leave to remain. Now, if you're going to be in the UK anyway, and that's your objective, then definitely one should consider these lower routes. So these lesser sums that one can invest in the UK as a means to achieving an immigration outcome, settlement in the first instance, and then after that, naturalising as a British citizen. Now, the difference with the entrepreneur routes is that the sum you invest has got to be accompanied by some activity. So a business activity, a business plan, job creation, and various other criteria. But underlying it is the investment of a sum of money, just like with the Investor Visa route. The most common route is the £200,000 one. I've put in a separate route here. You can see £100,000. The reason I've put that in is it's not a distinct route, but I'm acting, for example, for 2 clients at the moment who are applying as an entrepreneurial team and combining funds into a joint account. So it's effectively £100,000 each. So that is a distinct route to that extent, applying as an entrepreneurial team. And then the £50,000 route is sort of twofold. There's the graduate entrepreneur route, and there is a route that involves securing seed funding or government grant or venture capital, which means that you can invest at that lower sum. So I'm going to be producing videos in this series, video guides on all of these different routes. But I wanted to just give you that overview and highlight that point that really today there's for some, little to be gained from applying under the investor visa route, which involves significantly higher amounts. And as I say, for some, the entrepreneur visa routes and the lower sums that have to be invested will be attractive. Now, for completeness, since we're looking at the overview, there is an expedited route under the entrepreneur route. So you've seen from this previous diagram that the more you invest, the less time it takes to settle in the UK. But I've put here the entrepreneur routes are all at 5 years, that it takes 5 years to settle in the UK. I mean, I've got a separate diagram here, which I was going to come to in a moment, but you can see here that you're looking at this 5-year period, an initial application, an extension application after 3 years, and then a settlement application at the 5-year point. So let's just have a look, because I wanted to show you that you can apply for an entrepreneur visa and secure indefinite leave to remain after 3 years. That's if you increase the turnover of the business by 5 million or more, or you create 10 jobs in the UK, 10 full-time jobs. Now, this latter one, 10 full-time jobs, is easier for some to secure than the £5 million turnover increase, which is for some more difficult to predict and plan for as an outcome than the creation of the jobs. So there is an expedited route, and really if you compare this route, creating 10 jobs within 3 years, you've got a great business plan, great business idea, I'll come back to that, then why would you invest £5 million in the UK to settle after 3 years if you've got to be in the UK to secure settled status? It seems to me that for many, applying under this route is going to be more attractive now that they've amended the scheme in relation to investor visas. So as I say, there's those two expedited routes under the entrepreneur scheme. So I wanted to touch briefly on the entrepreneurial team provisions, which are set out in this diagram, and then also on the provisions more generally for initial applications. As I say, the most common route is this 200,000 route. If you're applying under the 50,000 route, as you can see here, you've got to have seed funding, venture capital or government grant. And I've put down here the graduate entrepreneur. Now the funds need to be held in an approved bank. It's on a Home Office list, or is not a prohibited bank. The funds need to be disposable in the UK, and you can see that for each of these 25 points is awarded for a total of 95 points, which one needs to secure for the initial application to be successful. There's an English language requirement and a maintenance requirement. So the area here, which is often very tricky for people, is, in fact, although it may not seem like it at first blush, that the funds are available and can be transferred to the UK. So they're transferable to the UK. Now, the reason people struggle with this is because the evidential requirements are quite difficult to satisfy. You need to produce a letter from the bank, if it's outside of the UK that is, saying that effectively no one else has a claim on the funds, or they're not aware of any claim on the funds, and they can be transferable to the UK. Now, I think the reason why this causes so much difficulty is that the bank's risk threshold and their unwillingness to attract a claim from such an undertaking, if you like, or such a representation. And that's perhaps understandable. But you can see here from this template letter, let me just take you to the correct one. The letter for, this is a letter from an authorised financial institution. that they really need to say the following amount of money is in your name and is available for investment in a business in the United Kingdom. Or, as I'm saying, the applicant has agreed to form an entrepreneurial team and has the following amount of money in their own names available for investment in the United Kingdom. So that can be difficulty. That can cause difficulty. In certain jurisdictions, there are capital controls governing whether one can transfer money out of the jurisdiction, and the banks are sometimes reluctant to deal with that. So I highlight this simply because if you're investing in an existing business and you already have a bank account in the UK to which you're a signatory, perhaps a business account attached to a UK domiciled company, then subject to any other director who may be holding that account jointly with you, giving consent and giving a letter which is similar to this but in slightly different terms, then funds can, in many cases, be transferred to the UK in advance, and one can avoid the evidential difficulties concerning the banks. Now, it's difficult to open a bank account in the UK if you don't have some form of residence here. You can't generally do so on a visitor visa, and that's the reason why people aren't generally able, when applying for an entrepreneur visa, to have funds in the UK in a UK bank account. If they are able to do so, and we do deal with cases like this where they actually have the funds available in the UK, then it's a much easier proposition. One can produce bank statements to show that the funds have been available for 90 days and confirmation from any joint account holder who is resident in the UK that they're available for investment in the business. But if you're not able to do that, then unless you can become a signatory to a bank account for a business that is based in the UK, as I say, with a joint account holder who is resident in the UK, then this is more of a difficult proposition. We do have letters which are modified from this template, which make it easier for you to secure a letter from a foreign bank, and we've obviously worked with different banks that our clients have and can generally secure the required letter. But many people have difficulties with this if they're trying to represent themselves, or if they haven't had experience in it before. So I flagged that, and I just highlight this diagram here just to highlight the distinction. It's a much easier proposition if you have a bank account in the UK and the funds are available in that account or can be transferred to that account in the UK. If you have a foreign bank account, you can encounter obstacles. Some of the other evidential points that I'll just cover briefly are the declarations of the availability of third-party funds. Generally, when we're doing applications, we like to have the funds, our clients' funds, available in an account for 90 days. That means that no further proof of provenance is required. However, given the surrounding requirements or accompanying requirements, it's prudent to produce additional evidence of the provenance of funds. Ultimately, the Home Office, quite understandably, needs to be satisfied that these are not, for example, the proceeds of crime. And there's some other documents I wanted to highlight just in relation to this, the requirement for job creation. you must create 2 full-time jobs in the UK lasting for 12 months. Now this is just a diagram to highlight that point first of all. So the creation of those jobs within the first 3 years before applying for an extension application. Interestingly, the money itself does not have to be invested until you come to apply for the extension application. As long as it's invested before then it qualifies for the purposes of the extension application. However, the reality is it will usually be invested, if not in the beginning, then incrementally over a period. There's an overriding requirement that this must be a genuine business, and so if the funds aren't invested for any significant period of time, then that may raise questions when you come to the extension stage. This is just to highlight the absence requirements. So you need to bear in mind not only the absence requirements for indefinite leave to remain, so not more than 180 days outside of the country, but also the absence requirements for naturalising as a British citizen, if that's your objective. Now, I mentioned before that you need to wait a year after settling in the UK before applying to naturalise as a British citizen. But there the absence requirements are more restrictive, so unless you've organised your affairs and residence to make sure that you comply with these, then you could find yourself disappointed. And here it's it's 450 days, which is equivalent to half the absence requirement for indefinite leave to remain, so equivalent of 90 days a year, and no more than 90 days in the last year. So that's an important factor to bear in mind. So those are the key points. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to subscribe to the following episodes in this series, then I'll just quickly run over what they are. I'm going to deal in some detail with the £50,000 route, the £200,000 route, which as I say is the most common one, and I'm also going to deal with processing times. How long does it take for the application to be granted? I'm going to do a guide to the application form and the supporting documents that you need. And then we're also going to look at success rates. So success rates are pretty poor, but as I'm going to deal with in this video, there's a reason for that, and that's that many applications are misconceived in one respect or another, but particularly in relation to the viability of the business. We're also going to have a look at the interview process and the questions that you can expect to be asked when you apply, the so-called golden visa, or whether there is a UK golden visa, and I'm also going to look more at the entrepreneurial teams, and as I say, what is basically a £1,000 route if you're combining funds with another. So thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode.